Okay. It's good.
Okay, everyone, welcome to our fourth lesson. In past lessons, we've discussed the nature of God and our relationship. And in this lesson, we're going to discuss more us, our relationship towards God. So we're going to, and the style is we'll go through 4 questions. Not necessarily does one question lead into the next. Just 4 questions that JLI has surveyed and found that many people have these questions. So you might not have them, but you might be curious, or you might have a hunch what the answer might be, but you want to hear a more fleshed out resolution to what is Jewish take. So question number 1 is, do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Question number 2, is it kosher to have doubts in God? Question number 3, why do I have to fear God? And question number 4, I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? So these are popular questions, and we're going to dive in to question number 1. Do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? So there was once a guy going on a hike near a steep cliff and lost balance, slipped on some rocks, and was flying in the air. And with his he was able to grab onto some branch sticking out of the cliff, and he's holding on, but he feels he's about to slip. He says, God, can you help me, God? So suddenly the clouds part and a voice comes out and says, do you really believe in me? He says, absolutely, I believe. He says, okay, let go. He says, is anybody else up there? You know, sometimes when it comes to a challenging proposition, it's very hard to believe in God. So that's also when God asks us to do mitzvahs. Let's say God has a mitzvah for us. Let's say you're a divorcee and you want to marry someone. You fall in love with a guy and then you find out the guy's a Kohen, right? That's a hard thing to do. So Judaism has these hard asks that sometimes Judaism places requirements. So the question is, do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? What's your take?
I think if you're Jewish, like if you're born a Jew, you're a Jew.
If you're born a Jew, you're a Jew. So let's start by defining what makes someone a Jew. So take a look at the exercise on page 112. Is Judaism a race? No, there are Jews of all races. How about culture? Well, bagels and a smear of cream cheese, lox, gefilte fish, challah, chalent. There are many Jewish cultures that exclude all of those dishes, believe it or not. So clearly, like Hanukkah's coming up. You mentioned a Sephardic Jew, a latke. It's like, what is a latke? But yes, Ashkenaz Jew, latke is the staple of Hanukkah, right? So clearly it's not just the culture. How about nation? When we think of nation, what is a nation? Usually we think of a nation as people that live in the same homeland, speak the same language. But many Jews don't live in Israel, and there are many non-Jews that live in Israel too, right? So clearly that's not, and it's the language. Many Jews don't speak Hebrew. In fact, many Jews don't even know a word of Hebrew. How about religion? There are millions of Jews who identify as Jewish, but are not religious. So let's watch the video.
What makes a Jewish person Jewish?
Oops.
Do you need a kippah, a necklace, synagogue membership? Do you have to do anything at all? Here's a myth buster. Plenty of Jewish people have never seen a synagogue and have no clue about Jewish symbols, beliefs, traditions, or cuisine. But they are as Jewish as Moses. So, what's it all about? You see, we love to sort things into categories, create neat labels, and use those labels to help us understand our world a little better. Here are 4 popular ways of classifying people. Does being Jewish have to do with any of these? Are you Jewish because you belong to the Jewish race? Hold on, is there even such a thing as a Jewish race? Look at these images. These folks are all equally Jewish. Race doesn't appear to be a factor. Actually, non-Jewish people from the most diverse places and races can become fully Jewish. So we clearly can't define Jewishness as belonging to a specific race. Why don't we try culture? Are you Jewish because you follow the Jewish culture? Well, you might be, if there was a Jewish culture to follow. But there is no single culture common to all Jews. Here's why. The ancient Jews lived in the land of Israel for over a millennia, but they were forced into exile by the ancient Romans. That happened almost 2 millennia ago. Since then, Jews settled all over the globe. The result of Jews spending centuries in very different kinds of places was that they developed many very distinct cultures, including unique ways of dressing, unique foods, styles of music, prayers, practices, dialect, and celebrations. The result? There is no single uniform Jewish culture. So Jewishness is not based on culture. But don't worry, we've got 2 labels left. What about nationality? That's a legal term. It means that you belong to a certain country or state. If Jewish is a description of your nationality, it would mean that you are a citizen of a Jewish state. But that's not the case. We've got British, French, Alaskan, Turkish, Thai, Irish, Spanish, Argentinian, and Indian Jews. You'll find Jews in every country, and almost all of them are citizens only of the state within which they reside. Even the state of Israel includes millions of non-Jewish Israeli citizens. That pops the nationality argument, doesn't it? And here's a bigger buster. Historically, the Jews did not have an independent state for most of their existence as a people. Strike 3. Religion. That sounds good. Are you Jewish because you follow the Jewish religion? Well, no, because many Jews do not associate themselves with any religion. In fact, there are many Jews who do not even know they are Jewish. And there are also Jews who practice a religion other than Judaism. But according to Judaism, they are all equally Jewish. Phew, this is really tough. I guess it's time for the one and only Jewish answer. Being Jewish means that you have a Jewish soul. How do you get a Jewish soul? The most common way is through a Jewish mother. You see, according to Judaism, every child to a Jewish mother is naturally born with a Jewish soul. Your mother's race and nationality make no difference. She might follow the Jewish religion or culture, or she might not. But if she's Jewish, you're Jewish. And there's no opting out. If you're born a Jew, it means that God decided that you're meant to be Jewish for life. So if you're Jewish, thank your mom. Then there's conversion. If you were not born to a Jewish mother, but you complete the authentic and challenging Jewish process of becoming Jewish, God will give you a Jewish soul at the moment of conversion. So what can we take away from all this? It is the privilege and responsibility of each Jew to lead a Jewish life, but those who do not are authentically Jewish. Living the Jewish way allows your soul to shine, but it does not create your soul. That's already alive and kicking inside you, waiting for you to connect. So what is a Jew? It's a spiritual force within you.
Okay, so what is a Jew? One who has a Jewish soul. One of the ways to think about it is like family members or citizens. If you're a citizen, what if you're a bad citizen? What if you're a criminal? You're still a citizen. What if you are a traitor to your country? You're still a citizen, right? You're a citizen, even if you're a traitor to your citizenship. It's who you are. Same thing is if you're a family member. You're born into the family. So now this person is your father or mother. Now you could deny that. You could hate them. You could mistreat them, not treat them like family members, but it doesn't change the reality that these are your parents. So if you're a Jew, you're a Jew, you're a Jew, whether you believe or not. And so you could be practicing a different faith, a different religion. From the Jewish perspective, you're Jewish all the way. Any questions? No. Okay, so we'll continue. Let's get a volunteer to read for us text 2. Genya, if you could read for us text 2 on page 114.
Okay. A Jew's essence. Jewishness is not a casual feature of a Jew's identity. Rather, it is his or her very essence. The status of a human, animal, or vegetable is immutable. I'm sorry, declaring that one is no longer a human, that an animal really isn't an animal, or that a vegetable is no longer a vegetable is ineffective. Even if a person will go so far as to deny their own existence or the existence of the human species, it still won't help. It is not a question of free will. We possess free will over our behavior, action, speech, and thought, but not over our essence and identity.
Okay, so this explains something interesting. You think about the Jewish people as the chosen people. Does that mean we're better than other nations? Well, depends what we're talking about. Our claim is that we have a Jewish soul that's unique to the Jewish people. Our claim isn't that Jews are behave better than non-Jews. There can be many non-Jews that behave better and should be than many Jews. So it's not a claim on our behavior, the way we act, the way we present ourselves. It's just a claim on our Jewish soul. That when we were chosen, we were gifted this Jewish soul. Kind of how a spouse might choose someone to be their partner in life. Does that mean that none of the other men or women in the world are better or worse? No, this is the one for me. So God chose us as a Jewish people. We have the Jewish soul from then. This passes on through the mother, through generations. In fact, there are many stories of people finding out and discovering, hey, 4 generations ago, I'm Jewish. So I'm not really Jewish. And they say, hold on, is it from your mother's mother's side? Oh, so you're 100% Jewish. So that's an incredible thing. So you don't have to believe to be Jewish. However, it's very helpful to live your life in accordance with reality. If you're a person and think you're a chicken, so then it leads to complications. And sometimes because of different things, we try to take shortcuts, and whenever we run into complications, we try to change our identity to make things easier or more convenient. But in the long run, it never becomes more convenient. It actually becomes more complicated. So it's always very important, even when there's strong tests, to try to behave in accordance to our essence. So even if consciously we don't feel Jewish or we don't behave Jewishly, but deep down we are Jewish, and it behooves us to live according to who we are. Any questions? Just an interesting side point. Why does it go through the mother line? Why does it go through the mother? Why not the father? Anyone thought about this? Stan.
Mother gives birth to the child.
Okay, that's not bad, but the father fathers the child. So why the mother? So the truth is, we do it because the Torah says. That's how the Torah says, so we follow whatever the Torah says. But there are different explanations. One hinted to what Stan was saying, that with the mother, it's more easy to know that this is the child of this mother. With the father, you never know who really the father is until today with DNA testing, but for thousands of years, you couldn't really know. But one of the main reasons is that, remember we said in I think in lesson 1, how the feminine aspect represents the nurturing and essential state of being. So when we speak about God as nurturing and just being, we speak about him in the feminine, or her in the feminine. But when we speak about God as acting or pursuing or conquering or revelation, that's in the masculine. So your Jewishness is an essence, an essential quality to who you are. So who you are comes from the mother line. what you do, your responsibilities, these are like your tribal affiliation, that comes through the father line. So you're a Kohen, a Levi, an Israelite, that comes through the father. Okay. So a Jewish soul is attained by birth or through conversion. Practice or beliefs do not impact one's Jewish status. Even one who sins remains a Jew. That's text 3 from the Talmud. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Zavda. Rabbi Abba bar Zavda said, even one who sins remains a Jew. So the fact that you're Jewish doesn't mean you don't sin. It just means you're not behaving in accordance with your essence.
So that was.
Okay, but the truth is, it's even one level deeper. Okay, the one level deeper is the truth is this Jewish neshama, this essence that you have inside of you, it really does believe. It believes all the time. It's always there. So there's a part of every Jew in his subconscious that is a believer all the time. So you say, does a Jew have to believe? There's a part of you that does believe. You don't have to. You can't not believe. There's a part of a Jewish soul that believes. You ever heard the statement, there are no atheists in a foxhole? Right? It comes to this idea that when life is at crisis, starts believing. When the plane's about to crash, people start believing. But Judaism actually spins it on its head and says it's actually the opposite. Because what is the expression, there's no atheist in a foxhole? The expression is, you have nothing else to hold on to, so you reach out to God. When you're drowning, you'll grab onto straw, even though you don't think the straw will save you. But the reality is exactly the opposite when it comes to Jewish people. History has shown us that many, many Jews, countless Jews, have been willing to give up their life rather than denounce their Judaism and their commitment to God. Even Jews who were not committed their whole life. Jews who were not committed their whole life, but when they were put at the stake and they said, convert or die, they had an easy option out. What was the easy option out? Convert. So the Jew is ready to put himself in danger for his belief in God. Versus the classic statement is, when in danger, you believe in God. No, the Jew puts himself in danger to prove his commitment to God. There was a Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, he passed away during COVID, and he was once giving a class. He was very famous for his lectures on the book Tanya. And in there, it discusses this idea. Let's read it in the inside, text 4, and then we'll get back to the story. Stan, if you could read for us text 4.
When the Jew comes out, even the most irreverent and sinful Jews typically surrender their lives to sanctify Hashem's name. They are prepared to suffer harsh torture rather than denounce the one Hashem, even if they are morally uncultivated, uneducated, and ignorant of God's greatness. Even concerning the little they do know, they give it little serious thought. So they aren't giving up their lives as a result of intellectual appreciation or deep thinking about Hashem. Instead, without any intellectual appreciation or careful thinking, they give their lives, for they consider it impossible to betray the one God despite lacking of any reasoning. Should I continue?
No, that's good. So we see when it comes to Jews behaving in a conscious way, so consciously they maybe don't believe, they say they don't believe. In fact, I'm sure many of you know Jews who say they don't believe in God, but subconsciously they do believe. And when they're forced to ignore their conscious level, and they're forced to confront their subconscious state of what they really believe, they come to the fore as Jewish. So he was presenting this, Rabbi Steinsaltz was presenting this idea in his class, and one of the students said, does this really apply today? Today, maybe for hundreds of years that's been true, but maybe history has changed. He didn't really have a good answer. He says maybe Jews really have drifted away so far, and maybe they really don't believe. The next day, he was giving a lecture in northern Israel, and he came across the group he was lecturing to. They really weren't interested in his lecture. So he said, you guys, if you're not educated, you guys are not Jewish. If you're not educated on Jewish ideas, how could you call yourself Jewish? When he said this, what was the response? One of the students got up who was making a big ruckus earlier and said, how dare you? My father's not religious, my grandfather's not religious, and my great-grandfather's not religious. But if anyone came to us and said that we're not Jewish, I'm ready for a fight. In other words, even today, we might not be aware of it. Even today, our essence is Jewish and we cannot change it. There once was a rabbi who was sent on a mission by the previous Chabad Rebbe. It was called the Frierdiker Rebbe. He came to America in 1940. And he sent one of his students to Chicago to visit a man named Mr. Linzer. Mr. Charles Linzer, 5-6 generations ago, came from a prominent Chabad family, but he came to America in the early 1900s and became very Americanized. And he had very little to do with Judaism. It was very hard to reach, but eventually this rabbi, Shmuel Levitin, was able to get a meeting with Charles Linzer. And they were going through they were reminiscing on Chabad history and American history and Jewish topics and whatever they were schmoozing about. And eventually, Mr. Linzer pulled out his checkbook. He said, I didn't come here to raise funds. He says, well, you came to Chicago not to raise funds. Why did you come to meet me? He says, well, a Torah scroll has many letters. What happens if one letter is missing? The whole Torah scroll is not kosher. So many shtetls, many towns used to have a scribe. His responsibility was to check through the Torah scroll, and any ink, any letters that were getting faded or scratched or missing, he would fill it in. Well, my rabbi is the scribe of America. He looks out for those Jewish souls that are fading, and he tries to fix them. So he sent me to you to try to arouse you to return. Anyways, the meeting ends. He goes back to New York and he shares, this idea he came up with the Rebbe as the scribe, with the ink and the parchment, the Torah, the letters of the Torah scroll. And the previous Rebbe Smiley said, that's pretty good. I like it. But I would have changed a minor detail that actually makes a big difference. Jews are not letters on a Torah scroll because ink can come apart from the paper. Jews are more like the letters engraved in the tablets of the Ten Commandments, that no matter what you do, the letter is always connected with the tablets. It can never become disconnected. Ink could become disconnected from the parchment, but the letters of the tablets of the Ten Commandments never become disconnected from the tablets. It could get covered over in dirt, it could get covered in mud, so it's very hard to discern what the letters are, but the letter is always one with the tablet, and that's the Jewish soul. Anyways, Mr. Linzer actually ended up championing many, many important projects, the publishing of many important Torah books and other important activities that actually helped revitalize the Yiddishkeit, Judaism in America and the United States. Okay. Any questions before we move on to the next topic? Good. Okay, so an atheist, when in danger, turns to God, which is an action of despair. A Jew invites danger even when they can easily escape it by denouncing God. Can easily escape it and say, okay, I'm Christian. Right? But you cannot change who you are. There once was a Jew who felt pressure to convert. So they bring him to the baptism ceremony and they say, you're a Christian, you're a Christian, you're a Christian. Says, but they tell him, you better be legitimate. We don't want any hypocrites. We want you legitimately to accept this baptism. And the way we'll know is if you're roasting meat on Friday, we'll know that you're preparing meat for Shabbos, because it's a mitzvah to have meat on Shabbos. Anyways, the next Friday, they see he's preparing his challenge and he's having the meat. They say, what are you doing? How are you serving the meat? He's like, no, it's very simple. I took some water, I sprinkled, you're a fish, you're a fish, you're a fish. Now the meat is a fish, right? So obviously it doesn't work. The same thing a Jew. You could sprinkle water from today to tomorrow. It doesn't change who we are. Okay, next topic. Is it kosher to have doubts about God? What do you think?
I don't think you blame you.
What? He wouldn't be angry. He wouldn't be upset. He wouldn't blame you. Very good. So then I'll give you the short answer and then we'll flesh it out. The short answer is questions are good. Remember, we said having questions are good. Having doubts are no good. But having doubts, who created us with doubts? Hashem created us with doubts. So it means it's a natural thing to have doubts. We shouldn't feel ashamed if we have doubts. We shouldn't feel like, oh, we're less Jewish or we're hypocrites because we have doubts. But we should try to discard them. And the way to discard them is not by attacking it and challenging it, it's by ignoring it. But let's try to flesh it out. Let's try to flesh out this answer. Let's start off with, there are many doubts that just pop up into our head. They come from time to time. And they could, what happens when a person is beset by doubts? The most common feelings are, I'm a hypocrite. I say I'm Jewish, but then I have these feelings, and it leads to feelings of shame or cynicism, or it makes us become cold. So let's say we're praying. How can you pray with doubts? All of a sudden, everything becomes cold. I'm talking to God, but does he really hear what I'm saying? Is he really going to answer my prayers? Do I even matter to him? Does he care? These doubts can ruin our ability to connect to God when we have mitzvahs. So doubts do happen. But it's God who put the doubts there. So the truth is the way we have to look at it is we have our deeper parts of the soul. Deeper parts of the soul are always committed to God, like we just explored in question number 1. Deepest part of the soul is always connected. Our conscious mind, part of our conscious mind raises doubts. And that is normal. It is normal, nothing to be ashamed about, created from God. But we ignore it. Think about it let's say someone is being gaslighted. Everyone familiar with the term gaslighting? It's when an abuser convinces someone of a reality that isn't true, but just repeating it so often that the person starts to doubt themselves of what is real and what is not. So it comes from a film where a husband kept on turning down the gas light, and the wife would say, "Is it dark in here?" "No, it's just as light as it was before." "Did you turn it down?" "No, I didn't touch it." And kept repeating it, and suddenly the woman starts going insane and feeling like, I don't know what's reality, what's not reality. So let's say a person knows that they're being gaslighted. What's the best response? Is the best response to argue and say, "No, you did turn it down. You did. You're lying to me"? The best response is to just ignore or to call out the bullying. "You're gaslighting me." Call it out or ignore. When someone calls you up and says, "Hi, I'm a Nigerian prince and I have $1 million for you, and you just have to give me your banking numbers." What is the best strategy? To engage the scam caller and tell him, "Oh, I have proof you're not a Nigerian prince," or start investigating whether he's telling the truth or not? The best approach is to just hang up, right? So that is the approach that Jews take to doubts. Questions encouraged. Questions of curiosity are encouraged. In fact, we have the Seder night. We encourage the children to ask questions. Good. We're using our minds. This is a mitzvah. But doubts, if they're just doubts, we push them aside. We hang up. Where does this strategy come from? This strategy comes from an understanding of the Zohar. The Zohar illustrates with the following story. So let's get a volunteer. We'll get someone from the in-person crowd. So Gail, read for us text 6, page 118.
God wished that people constantly serve him and follow the true path to merit much good. If this is indeed God's will, how could an evil servant come and incite against the will of his master, turn people to the evil path, thrust them from the good path, and cause them not to do the will of their master? Certainly, he is doing the will of his master. This is analogous to a king who had an only son whom he cherished. He lovingly commanded him to come near a disreputable woman, because anyone who approached her would not be worthy to enter the king's palace. The son promised that he would lovingly heed his father's commands. Outside the king's palace was a prostitute who was very beautiful to behold. After a few days, the king said, "I want to see my son's feelings toward me." He called the prostitute and told her, "Seduce my son, who tests his feelings toward me." What did the prostitute do? She pursued the king's son and started to grab him, kiss him, seduce him in various ways. Now, if the son were decent and had heeded his father's commands, he would scold her, ignore her, and thrust her away. Then the father rejoices with his son, brings him to the inner sanctum of his palace, and gives him presents, gifts, and great honor.
Okay, so to summarize, we have doubts. Why did God give us doubts? It's kind of an aptitude test. It helps us see our abilities. We don't know who we really are until we're pushed and challenged, right? Many people don't realize they have these special gifts until they're pushed into a corner, and then they realize, hey, I had this whole nother side to me that I wasn't in touch with. So tests push us to uncover deep treasures within ourselves. So God puts doubts. When we overcome those doubts, now our belief is much stronger. Things that are constant, we don't realize, we ignore them. The things that fluctuate, we start paying attention. And what's the strategy? The Zohar says, that side of you that's raising the doubts, it's called your evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, he's in on the game. He's hired by God to raise those doubts. Now, what if you're going to start convincing the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, hey, you're wrong, you're wrong, I believe in God, what you're saying is false. The evil inclination doesn't need convincing. He knows what he's saying is not true. He's like the prostitute that was hired by the king to test the prince. The prostitute doesn't want the prince to fail, but it's her job to make the prince fail. And then when the prince overcomes that and shows his loyalty to the king's request to stay away, that shows the great strength, the moral strength that the prince has. So that's the strategy where it comes from. Any questions before we move on? Okay, I'm doing great. So few questions tonight. Okay, so let's go to question number 4. Question number 3. Okay, let's conclude. Having doubts equals God's confidence in your ability to overcome them. So when you have doubts, not only shouldn't you feel shame, you should feel, wow, God believes in me. He's casting doubts. That means I can overcome these doubts. So it's a confidence booster. They are a testament to your superior power. So counter them from a place of empowerment by just disregarding them. Okay. Why must I fear God? Imagine put yourself in the shoes of a therapist, and a woman comes to you and says, I cannot stand it. The entire time I'm home, whenever my husband comes home, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm walking on eggshells. What would you say is the state of this relationship? Good or bad? Not good. Very unhealthy, extremely toxic, right? So fear, we usually associate with a negative state in a relationship. So when we read that a Jew should fear God, the typical reading that people say, wow, this is toxic, this is unhealthy, this is abusive, this is God is controlling and he's forcing the Jews, you better behave or punishment is coming. Doesn't sound too healthy. And yet, it's a mitzvah in the Torah. So how do we understand this? Let's look at text 8a, page 121. Maimonides, in his magnum opus, he codifies all the laws of the Torah. He said, it is a mitzvah to love and fear this glorious and awesome God, as the first verse states, and you shall love your God and fear your God. Okay? There was once a burglar who breaks into a home in the middle of the night, and suddenly he hears a voice, God is watching. So he gets nervous, but he looks around, he doesn't see anyone. So he continues, he goes to the stereo, grabs the stereo. God is watching. Turns around, doesn't see anyone. He goes to the dresser, he pulls out a watch. God is watching. See, he puts his flashlight, suddenly sees a parrot up at the top. It's like, was that you? Yes, it's me, Moses the parrot. It's like, what stupid owner called the parrot Moses? He said, it's the same owner that named the dog God. Right? The Rottweiler is watching, fine. So it's a pretty interesting relationship we have. God is watching us, he's testing us, he's controlling us. You read in the prayers, there's a lot of text that describe God's awesomeness and God. So it's quite scary relationship to have. And we say God is our father, but he's also our king. He's nice, he's loving, but he's strict. It's very difficult to have a relationship with someone who you're frightened of and you're nervous. But the truth is, the truth is that the way people translate fear is the common scenario. When we say we're afraid of something, what's our reaction when we're afraid of something? To avoid it. We kind of retreat. Physically, we become small, we shrink. How about love and generosity? It really relates to the kinds of things of, I want to become close to that. I want to get closer to that, or expansion. And these are Kabbalistic truths, that love is connected to expansion, extension, growth, and fear, yira, is connected to retreat, pulling away, leaving space. Unhealthy fear is toxic, but healthy fear is good. And it doesn't come across in the English, but it's more the word awe. When we say something's awesome, try to think of a space when you felt something was awesome. This past Sunday, I was in a room with 4,000 other rabbis. That was an awesome experience. Was I afraid? No, but what was the sense that it brought within me? It brought a sense of humility, of wow, there's something grand over here. There's something bigger, much bigger than my little world and my little shtetl that I live in. There's a much bigger picture that I'm part of. This is a feeling that comes about when you're by the Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls or next to a famous, awe-inspiring figure. There was once a mobster, and he shares, I was never afraid of my life. The one time I was afraid, he lived in Toronto, and he once gave a ride to Golda Meir. So what do you mean? Golda Meir held a gun to your head? No, but that just made me feel so, I was so enamored with her presence. That was the only time I felt in awe. Like I lost myself. I lost who I was. I lost my personal self of who I am in her presence. So the correct fear is not a fear of danger. It's not God is dangerous. It's God is so awesome in the true sense of the word awesome that it makes us feel very small and very lucky to be part of God's big scheme of how the world should work. So let's look at text 8b, because this is the continuing. Yes.
Just one thought. My understanding is when we're a yarmulke, the word comes from Yirei Elohim to demonstrate our fear of Hashem.
That's right. The kippah is Yarei Malka, yarmulke. Yarei Malka means the fear of the king. It's this constant presence that I'm part of something that's bigger than me. Very good. So let's read Maimonides 8b, page 122. What is the way of love and fear of God? When a person contemplates God's wondrous deeds and creations and appreciates his infinite wisdom that defies all comparison, they will immediately love, praise, and glorify God, yearning with tremendous desire to know God's great name. When they reflect on these matters, they will immediately tremble in awe and fear, aware that they are but teeny, humble, and dull creatures of slight petty wisdom before his perfect knowledge. So it's the same meditation that leads to great love of God is the same exact meditation that leads to a feeling of humility and humbleness. And this idea, this principle is one of the key secrets that Judaism has to understand what makes a healthy relationship. You ask people brought up in American culture, Western culture, it's love. Love is the key. Love is not the key. Love is one of two ingredients, and it's the second ingredient. The first ingredient is respect. The first ingredient is respect, understanding that that person has their own space. Love is about the person feeling the love. It's about me. I love that person. I want that person. I want to come close to that person. So it's all about me. What happens when I'm having a hard day or that thing doesn't interest me? And you walk away, you jump ship, because it's all about me. So I'm always me, and I always love me more than I love anything else. So if that's your foundation of a relationship, those relationships don't last. A relationship that's built on respect, that you're someone that's different and unique and valued. Now we can build on that love. And when love is built on a foundation of respect, that will last a long time. In the Zohar's words, love and awe are the two wings of a bird. If you have only one, the bird will fly in a very disoriented way. You need two wings to fly. So when you do a mitzvah, the mitzvah is the body of the bird. If it has no awe and fear, no awe and love, the mitzvahs don't fly. You did a mitzvah. The mitzvah is the main part, the main event. But without love and awe, it's a dead mitzvah because you're not thinking about why you're doing this mitzvah. You're doing it to connect with Hashem. Okay, so let's walk through these slides to summarize. So when we look at these definitions of fear, fear is a basic and intense emotion aroused by the detection of an imminent threat. Right? Compare that with Maimonides' definition of fear, an emotion that stems from an appreciation of how great God is. So whenever you read in Jewish liturgy about fear of God, it's talking about Maimonides' definition of fear, of an appreciation for who God is, versus our classical definition of fear, which is an awareness of a threat. Realizing that this awe-inspiring God is watching you at all times leads you to constant awareness and awe of his presence. We understand that fear of God really means awe. But can't we stick with just love? Love is selfish. It's about me. I want to connect to him. I want to make him happy. But the first word is always I. So even if it's coming from a loving place, you're the center of attention. It's I love my son, but I'm the starting point. Versus awe is the opposite. The other becomes the starting point. An awareness of how great he, she, or it is, and that makes me feel humble before them. So here's a way to think about it. Let's say you come home. I'm thinking of a good example for this. Let's say you like, music. You like music and your wife likes flowers. So what happens if you get her a CD that you really like? It doesn't mean the same as if you got her what she wants. She likes flowers, you get her flowers. So sometimes here's another example to think about it. Let's say Friday night we do a musical. We do a if anyone who's been to prayer services here Friday night, we do it with a lot of singing, a lot of song, a lot of joy. But something that would enhance it a lot would be instruments. No, wouldn't instruments up the vibe? Why don't we do that? Why don't we add instruments? Because we love God. Sure, we love God. And we want to do things that bring more joy. But what does God want? So the love tells us we want to bring our whole selves to God. We could bring more of ourselves if we add instruments, right? It intensifies the feelings. But awe inspires not what do I want, but what does God want from me? Right? So the truth is, it's this constant, we have to have both. And it's like the heartbeat. If you only have the part of the heart that contracts or only expansion, if you don't have the contraction and expansion, you don't have a heartbeat. You need both. You need both. You need the expansion. You need, God, I want to come close to you. Now that I feel I want to get close to you, actually, what do you want me to do? So it's this constant back and forth. So why must I fear God? Fear of God is a deep sense of awe. It takes us out of our naturally selfish ways, bringing us closer to God. Final question. I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? Any thoughts? Is it important? Is it not important? Okay, so
Okay,
let's
Rabbi,
go.
you cannot be religious, but you could still follow the tenets of the Torah. For example, one prime example is Kivud Av Ve'em. You don't have to be religious to follow Kivud Av Ve'em and all the other commandments.
Okay, that's a good starting point. So raise of hands. Who thinks I'm religious? I knew that was going to be the answer. Do you think I'm religious? Okay. So what the shift I want you to make in this last part of the lesson is that religious is not important in Judaism. Being religious doesn't matter in Judaism. The only thing that matters is connecting to God. That's the only thing that matters, is connecting to God. So if you're doing something that connects you to God, that's good. Don't be religious. Do things that connect you with God. Now, remember, at your core, you're always connected to God. Nothing will change that. You have a Jewish soul, that Jewish soul is always connected. But we have to bring that to our whole experience. Every part of our identity has to connect with God, even our conscious mind and our beating heart have to feel in love with God. And we do that by connecting with God. So that's all that matters. So I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Good. You don't have to be religious, but you should do everything you can to connect with God. Let's try to break that down. Okay. Well, there are, you can do religious things that don't connect you to God, that actually distance you from God. I'll give you an example. In the Holy Temple, the people that perform the different services that were done in the Holy Temple are called Kohanim, the Kohen, the priests. One of the things, the first task of the day was cleaning up the altar. There was a fire on the altar that would burn all night. And at the end of in the morning, early dawn, there was ashes. And so it was a special mitzvah for a Kohen to remove the ashes and to bring it outside the temple. Now, originally, it was first come, first serve. Whoever gets to the top of the altar first gets the job. Now, just to describe, the altar was about 30 cubits high. 30 cubits is about 50 feet. 50 feet tall. That's how high the structure is. So about the height of a house, right? Average house, the height of the house. It had a very long ramp. Okay, so whoever raced up that ramp and got to the top first got the honor of cleaning the ashes. Eventually, they changed it and made it a raffle system, a lottery system. Why did they change it? Because there once was a Kohen that was running up the ramp, and it felt that he was about to lose. So what did he do? He pushed the other Kohen off the ramp, and the other Kohen. This story happened twice. One time a Kohen broke a leg, another time a Kohen died. Okay, what do we see? This person was clearly motivated in doing something for God, right? He wanted to take off ashes, but at the same time, he did something that God doesn't like. He pushed someone off the altar. Because what was his motivation? His motivation, in a sense, was he was trying to be religious. Sometimes when you try to be religious, you could do things that actually disconnect you from God. When instead, if your focus is, what can I do to connect to Hashem? Then it says, the same God who wants me to clear off the ashes also wants me to be kind to other people and not put my selfish needs first. So being religious doesn't make you a selfless person. You could be selfishly religious. But doing things to connect to God makes you a selfless person. So that is the key here. Another way we see that is a story I love of two brothers named Elimelech of Lezhensk and Zusha of Anapon. Elimelech and Zusha. So Elimelech and Zusha were traveling Hasidic Jews, very righteous, holy people. And one time they got caught up, they got arrested for who knows why. They got arrested, they were in jail. This was about 250 years ago. And Elimelech starts to cry. So Zusha says, why are you crying? A Jew has to be happy. You always have to be happy. He says, no, I'm not crying, I'm in jail. I'm crying because look, there's 30 men in the cell with one big bucket in the middle where everyone goes to the toilet. How could you pray in such a place? You can't pray next to the toilet. So now I have to be here. I can't learn Torah. I can't pray. What kind of life is that? So Zusha said, what are you talking about? The same God who wants you to pray is the same God who in this situation doesn't want you to pray. So when you are praying in a synagogue, you're doing a mitzvah. And when you're not praying here, you're also doing a mitzvah. You're doing the mitzvah of not praying. So you also have to be happy. You have to be happy in this mitzvah too. He says, you're right. And he started getting up. They started dancing and singing. And all the other downhearted prisoners is like, hey, there's fun here. So they also started dancing and singing. The prison guard is like, what's going on here? What's the ruckus? And they said, I don't know. These two guys were pointing to the bucket. And they started dancing. They said, I have to get rid of this bucket. He took it away. And then Zusha was able to pray and Elimelech was able to study Torah. So the point is that no matter what situation we find ourselves in, the goal always has to be not to be religious. That's not the goal. The goal is connection. And therefore, it's not an all or nothing package. When we think in terms of religiousness, so we kind of think it's all or nothing. Because either I'm a religious person or I'm not a religious person. If I'm religious, then I have to be 100%. If I'm not religious, then I don't have to keep anything. But the point is, if it's opportunities of connection, then you always introduce into your life more opportunities to connect. So let's say you have a business that is open on Shabbat. Well, that doesn't contradict your ability to say, you know what? Within this business, I'll try to be more Jewish on Shabbat than on the rest of the days. Because it's not all or nothing. It's not all or nothing. It's in each context, we could always do things to find deeper connection. So, as text, let's start with the following statement. Text 10. Let's Joe, read for us text 10, page 125.
A Jew knowing incapable of violating God's will.
Oh, yeah, it's Joe is good. Okay,
uh,
either way.
Violating God's will because of a certain spirit of insanity that takes hold of them, convincing them that this infraction will sever their connection with God. Why? Because aware of succeed and stone.
Okay, so the Alter Rebbe is saying there's a certain psychology a Jew has. A Jew, at the end of the day, he always wants to be connected to God. That's the only thing that matters. So why does a person behave less religiously sometimes? Because it says, this is not going to ruin my connection to God. But if I eat the wrong sandwich, all of a sudden my connection is disconnected. And the answer is no, you're still connected. Once a Jew, you're always a Jew. So he says, okay, if that's the case, when a Jew is faced with these, he feels like God can't possibly care about this. He's more likely not to do it if it's difficult. When he's forced to confront and say, this is difficult, but God really cares about it, most Jews will actually do it. Most Jews will actually, if they feel this is something that God deeply cares about, because a Jew doesn't want to be religious, but he wants to be connected. A Jew wants to be connected. So there's once a person who walked into a post office before Hanukkah, and he said, I'd like to have 50 stamps. It's like, oh, it's Hanukkah time. Would you like Hanukkah stamps? Yeah, I want 50 Hanukkah stamps. In what denominations? Like, oh, we already came to that. Okay, I'll take 7 Orthodox, 12 conservative, 15, right? So we tend to put on these labels of people, conservative, Orthodox, Reform. The interesting thing is that Sephardic Jews, they don't have these labels. Did you notice? Sephardic Jews don't have labels, conservative, Reform, Orthodox. What do they have? There's Jewish. I'm less. That's an Israeli thing. That's not Sephardic. What? No, I get what you're saying, but for the most part, there's one Torah. There's one. I don't keep the whole Torah. I keep more. I keep less. That's general how it is by Sephardic Jews, and that's much closer to the truth. The truth is, there's only one God. There's only one Torah, and we're either feel close or don't feel close. We try to keep more. We try to keep less, wherever we are in our lives. So in that framework, you can have someone who has beard and payas, wears a kippah, and is less connected on a conscious level than someone who doesn't have a kippah and a beard. What's the difference? This person was raised religious, but he feels no connected to God. The reason he does his mitzvahs is by routine. And so he's really facing downwards. He's like on the top of the ladder, but he's going down the ladder. Versus someone else is on the bottom of the ladder, but he's heading up. In that model, really the person on the bottom is really closer because he's doing a mitzvah of connection. He's doing an intent to try to feel closer. And that is this understanding is the technology, the spiritual technology that frames Chabad's activities, or why Chabad will stop someone in the street and say, excuse me, are you Jewish? Oh, you're Jewish? Here at Sukkot, come shake the Lulav HaNesrek. Say, what value does that Lulav HaNesrek have? He's going to shake it, and what's going to happen? All of a sudden, his life is going to change. He's going to become a religious man? Probably not. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This one mitzvah is an opportunity to connect. It's an infinite opportunity. It doesn't matter what it leads to. Now, the fact is, some people, they put on tefillin for the first time and they start to cry. They say, what's that? You just put on some leather boxes. Why are you crying? Because when a Jew is given that opportunity to connect, now it's for the first time they start feeling whole. Like, I'm finally in touch with a part of my neshama that I've never been in touch with my whole life. It's an overwhelming experience. So this technology of understanding that it's not about being religious, it's about connection, And that's very important to understand. So let's walk through this. Your relationship with God has nothing to do with religion. Religion is commonly viewed as a status and identity. At both ends, identifying oneself religiously is dangerous. Whether you identify yourself as religious or irreligious, both of those are toxic labels to carry. Identifying as non-religious, if I'm not all in, then what's the point of doing anything, right? That's if you say you're not religious. What happens if you identify as religious? What's the big pitfall you run into? If I look the part, there can't be much wrong with my little misdoings because I'm anyways religious. So who cares if I snub my taxes a little bit? Right? I'm a religious person on the whole. So who cares if I gossip a little? Because it's all about religious. So you have this moral equivalence. Oh, I'm better than somebody else. So it's okay if I play games over here or there. Judaism is not about attaining a religious state. Judaism is about serving and connecting with God, which is accomplished through mitzvot. Religious and irreligious Jews, there's no such thing as religious and irreligious. There's Jews who connect often and Jews who do so less frequently. Regardless of consistency, it is always worthwhile to enhance our relationship with God at all times. One mitzvah may seem insignificant, yet if we evaluate the world as equally balanced, this one mitzvah has tremendous value. There was an author, I don't recall his name, but he wrote a book called Tipping Point, where the basic premise of the book is that you have to build things. There's a certain scale that if you're trying to build your company and get a certain amount of users or customers, before the tipping point, you have to put in tremendous effort. And if for a moment you stop putting in the effort, the whole company will fail. But if you get to that tipping point, there's a certain number where kind of takes off a life of its own. And it gets its own life. Now you don't have to be the one to sustain it because it has its own life and its own meaning by just the mass that it has. It's a valuable idea, this idea of tipping point, finding that tipping point. The same thing exists, says Maimonides, in life. That every time that every person has to view that maybe this one mitzvah that I'm doing right now will be the tipping point. Then no more will we have to fight for good to prevail over evil. Maybe this mitzvah will be that mitzvah that will transform the whole world, that goodness will become self-sustaining. We won't have to struggle with it. So every person should at every moment view that their one mitzvah that they might be doing, that might be the tipping point. Or as the story goes with the child walking across the beach and saw many starfish, stranded on the sand, and he was tossing the starfish back into the ocean. And a man said, "What are you wasting your time? There's so many starfish on the sea." He says, "Yeah, I won't be able to do all the starfish, but to this one starfish that I throw back in, it's the world." So it's that idea that Maimonides says we should ingrain within ourselves that every single mitzvah is infinite connection, because God is an infinite being. So one mitzvah is an infinite connection. Let's find that on text. Text 13.
The rabbi,
Yes.
the danger in thinking like that, if a person does, let's say, hypothetically, one mitzvah, that mitzvah is a big deal to the person, and from what you're saying, to God. But if a person does many mitzvot, then do they also then lose value in the mind of the person? Because I'm doing so many things, it's not the same as when I had one connection.
So think about it in a relationship. Let's say you're right. In human people, if you buy the same gift to your spouse every single day, so the first day they're excited, the second day they're less so, and after a while it becomes routine and natural. Fine. But what if instead of trying to buy gifts, you're trying to buy connection? So in connection, it never runs out. Always in a relationship, there's never a time when the other person is like, hey, you connected to me already 5 years ago. You don't have to keep on connecting with me. You always have to update the connection. So God gives us many mitzvahs, as many opportunities, different ways. Each mitzvah is a different. One is a hug, one is a kiss, one is a letter, one is a gift. Everything is a different kind of. One is an act of service. Each one is its own unique way of connecting, and the ratio of how often God requires it from us is based on God's need of connection with us. So God says, I'll take whatever I can get. You want to give me one hug and that's it? I'll take it. You want to give me a hug and a kiss? I'll take that too. You want to know how often I want your hugs and kisses? Well, I want you to pray to me every day. I want you to keep the Shabbat once a week. I want you to say a blessing on the sun once every 28 years. Fine. So God has his calendar. And of course, we can use a lot of creativity within that character. It's not like, oh, God has everything laid out and we just follow it robotically. There's actually a lot that we can bring into it when that's how customs form. Different communities have different customs, different ideas, how we can enhance the relationship on our terms, be it with latkes or with jelly donuts. We each have our own way. So, Joe, read for us text 13.
Text 13. Throughout the entire year, people ought to view themselves as half worthy and half unworthy, and they ought to see the whole world as equally balanced between worthy and unworthy. If they perform one mitzvah, they tip their own balance, and that of the entire world, to the side of goodness and bring deliverance and salvation to themselves and others. This is implied by the verse, a righteous person is the foundation of the world. If one who acts righteously tips the balance of the entire world to virtue and redemption.
Very good. And there was a passage I was going to skip, but I see we have plenty of time. So I'm just going to do this extra passage on text 12, which explains an instant.
What page are you on?
Page 127. We're jumping back a page 127.
And where did you just read from? What page?
He read on page 128. I think.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know. All right.
Okay. Before every mitzvah, we recite a blessing. If you say it with me and see if you're familiar. Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Right? What do those words mean? Who has sanctified us with his commandments? The word sanctify, Kiddishanu, this means that a mitzvah is akin to a man who marries, because in Jewish law, marriage is also called kiddushin, kiddishanu. A woman to live with him in perfect unity. As the verse states, he shall attach to his wife and they shall be of one flesh. When you engage in Torah mitzvot, your godly animating soul unites with God in similar fashion, only infinitely more so. That's why King Solomon compared the soul's union with God to the marriage of bride and groom in Song of Songs, using terms of attachment, passion, yearning, hugging, and kissing. King Solomon wrote a work called Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, that most of the rabbis said, we have to discard this book from our canon of holy texts because it's a romantic novel. It's like a lover is pursuing, it's just a romantic essay. It's pretty juicy, right? Very descriptive, very graphic. And Rabbi Akiva says, if the whole Torah is the holy, this is the holy of the holies, because this is describing the other books are describing the things we do to connect, but they don't describe what's behind the things we do, which is our yearning to become one with God, and a true oneness that's only possible between a soul and God. And so he described it in this language because every mitzvah is essentially this thing. We're preparing a lunch for God, we're hugging God, we're kissing God, we're doing whatever it takes. We're writing a letter to God. Every mitzvah is this beautiful, loving relationship that we can have. So the takeaway from this part is don't try to be religious. Try to connect to God as often as possible. Okay? So just to bring up our question that we started off the section, I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? Sure, absolutely. Forget about religion and start building your relationship with God. Do a mitzvah. It's funny to hear a rabbi saying, forget about religion, but it's an important shift that we all have to make.
Lesson 4. His expectations. 1. Judaism is not only a culture, ethnicity, race, or religion. It is the essence of a Jew by dint of their having a Jewish soul. 2. Because of their Jewish soul, a Jew, A, is inherently Jewish, regardless of whether they believe in God, and B, really does believe in God. 3. Doubts about faith are normal and not indicative of a lack of faith. Rather, God sends feelings of doubt to test our resolve. 4. Inasmuch as doubts are just outside voices testing a Jew's resolve, they do not define his or her identity. The best way to deal with such challenges is not by engaging them, but by ignoring them. 5. Fear of God isn't feeling threatened by God. Rather, it is respecting and being in awe of Him. 6. Respect is a critical component in a Jew's relationship with God. It keeps one committed, even if love lapses. 7. Judaism isn't about the label religion. It is about connecting with God through Torah and mitzvot. 8. You don't have to be religious to have a relationship with God. Even if you are religious, you still need to maintain your relationship with God in actual practice.
Okay, next week, if you want to know, can God create a rock that he cannot pick up? If that's a question that you ever wondered about, or other paradoxes about God, we'll answer that next week. In the meantime, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. When Americans celebrate Thanksgiving, they are doing a mitzvah. They are connecting to God, but they may not realize it. But the whole idea of Thanksgiving is showing thanks to who? Who are we saying thanks to? Thanks to God, to the one above. So there's a big mitzvah for anyone to remind them of the meaning of Thanksgiving. It's not just about the turkey. It's about who we're being thankful for. There was once a rabbi in certain Hasidic communities. The custom is that when there's a mitzvah, there's a custom to eat kugel on Shabbos. Kugel is, everyone knows what kugel is?
Mhm.
Okay. So this Hasidic community, it's actually still a contemporary custom. If there was 2 Torahs that they read on that Shabbat, so they would actually serve 2 kugels, maybe a sweet kugel and a salt and pepper kugel. If there was 3 Torahs, they would serve 3 kugels. So someone asks his rabbi, what do you make of this custom? Is that a good custom or a bad custom? So it depends. If in synagogue, when they pull out 3 Torahs, you're thinking of kugel, not a good custom. If when you're eating the kugels, you're thinking of Torah, that's a great custom. So the same thing, if when you're eating the turkey, you're thinking of God, it's a beautiful thing. And may Hashem bless us all. Good Chodesh, have a good month. We start tonight the month of Kislev. We're getting ready for Hanukkah, and wish you all a wonderful week.
Rabbi, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Okay, the the class that we've had tonight discusses one's connection with God being more important than being religious, whatever that means. You said does everybody in this class think I'm religious? So obviously, there is a definition of what religious is. But
People
if,
think of religious as Orthodox. If you're Orthodox, but Judaism doesn't believe in Orthodox. It's not a Jewish label. It doesn't come from Judaism, that term Orthodox. It's a
Well,
Western language.
okay, well, we didn't discuss that, but which would be an interesting topic in and of itself, but truly, but the point is the purpose of when you say that one should, let's say one isn't religious and doesn't necessarily follow religious customs or ideas, but haven't we learned that following mitzvot is what actually brings one closer to God? I mean, someone could do good things and believe that they're a good person, but that's not the same thing as being a good Jew. Aren't you supposed to, as part of, even though the temple is gone and half the mitzvahs don't apply, that doesn't mean you don't need to know them. That
Right.
alone
So-
can be enough to bring
Sure.
one.
Right. So
The question is, without complying with even one mitzvah, how does that differentiate being just because I'm Jewish and I can't abandon my faith means that when I act and I decide to attribute what's godly or not, that makes me a good Jew?
no, no. What
Thank
makes you a
God.
good
Thank
Jew?
God. Thank God. Because
What makes
I
you a
think
good Jew is
I'm sorry.
is finding opportunities to connect with God more often. That's what makes you a good Jew.
Well,
So
what does that mean? I'm a good person. Why do I have to even study the Torah? Why?
well, remember we had a section about love and awe. When you love God, you want to do things to get closer to God. But when you're in awe of God, you think of, well, what does God want from me? So obviously you cannot love God only on your terms. You have to love God on God's terms. What does he want from you? So God has a Torah. He revealed to us what he wants from us. So when we do that, that's our way of giving God what he likes us to do instead of just what we like to do.
Well, I understand that, but you left this whole open area, or the class left this whole open area, that if you know nothing in the Torah and don't comply with it, you're still a Jew, and you can still connect to God. How do you do that if you don't understand what mitzvot is and aren't understanding the map or the plan that God?
Well, you start with step number one. You learn a little bit. You don't have to learn everything. You learn a little bit and you try to do that. Once you do learn a little bit, then you try to learn a little bit more. So that's what we're saying. It's not all or nothing. It's not like I don't know everything. And I'm a rabbi. I do this for a living, right? And still there's a lot that you could always discover deeper ways of connecting or getting things right. And that's why we're so Jews are so into the details. You know, you have to light the candles from the right to the left instead of the left to the right. And on the first night, 1, and the second night, 2. And you want your menorah to be 10 tefachim off the ground. It's all these details. There's a lot to learn, but it's not like, oh, well, I can't learn all of that, so I might as well do nothing. That's coming from a mind of irreligious. I'm irreligious, so I might as well be irreligious. Yeah. What do you know? Oh, you know to spin the dreidel? So spin the dreidel. Let that be your first step. From there, you could grow. There's always different, and it's not about growth. It's growth in the relationship, not growth in how many check boxes can I uncover? How can I, let me put on the black hat and the beard. That's not the most important thing. The important thing is doing things to connect as often as possible, like any good marriage counselor will tell you. Right?
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Rabbi.
everyone. Have a wonderful.
Have a very
Very
happy
good.
Thanksgiving,
Good night.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.